Good.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Hey guys, welcome. I thought maybe we would start by going around and having everybody introduce themselves, if that's okay. I'm Mary Lance, I'm the executive director here. If for those of you that might not have been here, and I think everyone has, this is our co-working space. And I can tell you more about that after the meeting. We're here to help businesses get started, and welcome to StartUp Salina.
My name is Megan, and I own Wild Fox Bookkeeping.
I'm Mary, and I own your business medic.
I'm Carlos, and I own WeHaul.
Robin Banata, I'm administrative assistant at the Salina EDO, and I also have a crafty side hustle.
There you go. I'm Robbie Denholm, and I'm a counselor with Consumer Credit Counseling Service, and starting to do a little bit of real estate.
I'm Anna Ray with SSC Advisors.
And I'm Amanda. Anna,
Yeah.
I know you.
Yes.
In one of my side hustle jobs, I know Anna, and now I know who Anna is in her face. I'm Amanda Littell, and I do lots of different things, but I think the thing I'm here to maybe have a conversation with you about today is coaching, life and leadership coaching. I have a part-time paid gig with the Presbytery of Northern Kansas, which is how I now realize that I know Anna, because she does our books for us. And then I also facilitate the Leadership Salina program that happens here. That is a program that's run by both the Chamber and the Community Foundation. So they hired me to do the facilitation for that program. So those are some of all the things that I do. I do lots of things because I do board reviews.
Amanda helped found this foundation.
Was on the board when we
Yeah.
started this? Yeah, for sure. I don't know, it's probably still in some papers somewhere, right?
A piece of you is here.
So do we have things to do first, or do we just start having conversations?
Start having conversations.
Okay, all right. So, I thought that, well, chairs in a circle, because I like conversation better than presentation. I think I was saying earlier that I'm about the least formal person that there is. So anything that I don't have to prepare some fancy presentation for is my gig. But I thought it would be interesting for each of you to think about the question. I'll ask the question first, and then we'll talk a little bit about coaching and how that works for your small business or your startup business or your big business. It doesn't have to be a small business, but so the question is, when you think about the future, put your business hat on. When you think about the future, what concerns you the most? You can take a minute to think about that for a second. Anybody have an answer? Or something that came to mind?
I do because I'm a sole proprietor and consultant. You know, it's not like I have staff, so there's nobody to take over my business. So unless I develop something that's sellable for my business, then, you know, it's not like somebody would want to buy my business because it's me.
Got it. I might challenge you on that. Somebody might want to buy your business because it's you. But yeah, so basically the future is what concerns you.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Who else?
Safety.
Safety?
Yeah.
So tell us more.
So this is what I'm trying to start up is hauling stuff for people. So if someone was to fall, insurance, I guess.
Yeah.
I have to take in, that's what concerns me the most.
And is it the fact that, is it having the insurance, the needing the insurance, what about that part is the
It's a little
concern?
bit of both right now because so I've called several different places for insurance and nobody can find the proper insurance. Not even just like general liability. And when I insure the business. So I'm in trouble with that.
Yeah, major concern,
Mhm.
because if you can't get it, then you can't move forward.
Mhm.
Yeah, big concern.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else?
I think for me, it's, because I'm starting a new foundation, we've been here 5 years, but how do I set this up for the future? How do I set it up so there'll be a next executive director and the staff that we need, and how do I do this right so that we've got the foundation that's solid, that's gonna grow?
So when you dig a little bit deeper into that, what is the first thing that comes to your mind about that? Like how part of that?
Yeah, now is, organizing the job so that it's not me doing all the things that I like to do, and then maybe the next person that took that job wouldn't be able to do that, or that wouldn't make sense for them to do that, or,
Got it.
So, yeah,
So being able to have some organization behind it, what has to be done, and then who about is doing it.
yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, very good.
I would say just like making the right decisions in general, because as a business owner, you're responsible for making all the decisions in the business, and just, you don't really have anyone to direct you, and so just hoping you're making the right choices along the way.
So how are you managing that right now?
Well, I'm still kind of in this startup. I've been in business, like a year and a half, so just kind of trying different things, virtual clients, local clients, big clients, local,
Yeah.
yeah.
If you could,
Some marketing and.
yeah. So if you could like wave the magic wand and solve this problem, what would that look like?
Someone to say this is the right way to. Oh, a coach to tell me
Oh, wow.
which way to be the right way.
Coaches don't tell anybody, but coach can be helpful, but really what I hear is you saying another human
Yeah,
to have conversation with about it.
right, yeah. And from somebody else.
Yeah,
No system
Yeah.
or something.
yeah. And would that other human have something, would it need to be somebody who has knowledge of the business or interest in the business, or would it just be somebody to have a talk through things with?
Yeah.
Depends on maybe the issue or the problem. If she's having some accounting issues, she's not gonna go to somebody who,
So if it's a technical thing,
right.
I teach Kansas Leadership Center stuff as part of Leadership Salina, and so we talk about different kinds of problems. Technical problems are the things that you can, as I like to say, you can go to Google and find the answer. I mean, it doesn't mean it's instantaneous, you sometimes have to research. But the other problems, I think, which what you're referring to too, are the ones you can't just go get the answer to. How do I make a decision for the next thing? Yeah?
Somebody who's walked in those same shoes.
Yeah.
The mentor.
Right.
Yeah, okay, yeah, good.
I think there's a case for a general business mentor and then a very specific niche type. business
Yeah.
advisor.
Yeah, good. What either of you guys, anything to add or think about as far as what concerns you the most about the future?
Technology
Mm,
with the times,
yes.
and then being able to bring clients with you.
Because it's one thing for you to
Yeah.
adopt, it's another thing for everybody else to go that direction. Yeah, that's a really good, technology, that's a really good point. Rodney, anything else to add? Anything?
Oh, boy. This would be more on a personal side, correct?
The reason you're here, the
Yes.
business side, yeah.
So I guess, and I'm always trying to multitask. And so it's on the counseling side, saying current, pertinent, relevant to what's out there. And then on the Next Home Pro Realty side, that's fresh and brand new, is what is that going to look like in 6 months or a year or 5 years from now or 10 years? And putting that kind of business plan together.
Anything else you want to add, Robin?
Yeah, my concern is if I put the steps forward to grow my side hustle, what happens when it grows so fast, or grows to the point where I can't handle it anymore, or I think, I've got fear of failure.
I think the fear of failure is huge for so many people. I think it's a lot of times related to the fact that it's you. And the fear of success almost is what I'm hearing you say, actually. Like,
Yeah.
what happens if I get to that?
And I can't handle it.
Yeah.
Hire more people.
So I think what's interesting about all of these comments is that I think it's really, really important for you to know your why in business. And I know, they talk about this and all these things, but what am I in this for? Because if I'm in this to be a side hustle, then I'm not going to worry about all the other stuff, because that's my goal. That's my why. I do this because it's A, B, C, or D, right? If I'm in this because I want to grow this into a business that's sellable, right? You're going to make way different decisions than somebody who's in it as a side hustle, right? And so that doesn't mean it can't change, because by all means, we all have the right to change our mind. But if we don't know right now what we're in it for, as far as what that looks like, every decision we make is going to feel conflictual, because, if you can't answer the question, what's my why, it's going to be really hard to feel confident in any question. It's like if you think about a nonprofit, right? If a nonprofit organization doesn't have its why, it can't continue to exist, right? They can't raise money because if they don't, if we exist to keep this historic building standing, that's a really easy way to find the right people to raise money, right? That's our why, period, end of story. One sentence, And if that's the case, then that can inform us then on all the questions we have along the
I
way.
said, put it on a post-it note, because there are mornings when you wake up and you're like,
What am I doing this for? But part of that is thinking about business, the future of a business. Because I hear you saying your future for this business is concerning to you because this, and this. So if that's the concern, what's your why, right? Like, if you're in this to provide a living for yourself right now while you're living, and maybe put some stuff aside for retirement, then who cares about the rest, right? Who cares about having to grow a business?
Well, right now it's way different from when I started.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We've got to keep going back to that. I love the thought of setting a time, literally putting it on your calendar, a certain time from now, to re-ask the question. So right now, your goal is, this is a side hustle. Then side hustle it all you want. And maybe in 8 months, you have a little note on your calendar that says, reconsider. Do I still want a side hustle, or am I interested in growing this? I still like the side hustle. Perfect. Side hustle all you want, right? So that you don't have to think of things always into perpetuity. That what's just give me this long to try it out. Technology, right? Like, let's pilot this with a few clients. We'll give them this long to try it out. We'll learn, they'll learn, then we can do the next step, right? Maybe the first pilot is with ourselves, right? Like our own technology needs. But right, I think it's just so easy to get so far ahead of ourselves that we can't rein it back. One step at a time. I don't like accounting, so I'm going to hire somebody to do the bookkeeping. And right now that works. I just made this up, but right now that works. Let's say right now that works, right? So Mary decides to retire, and someday the person who's here, that's part of their background and history, and they like to do it. Well, okay, but we don't have to think about that now. Let's think about it where we are, instead of this long range kind of thing. So what does that do if you could back your brain out like that? What does that do for some of the concerns about the future?
Make things less complicated,
Oh,
not as much noise.
could you give yourself permission to not go further than whatever?
Yeah.
I mean, it works for everything. This isn't just business, it works for your kids. Like, right now, we're gonna have 7 o'clock bedtime, and in my head, I'm gonna try that for the next 3 weeks, and we'll see how it goes. And then we can reassess, right? I mean, it's not just, it's, as a human, it's easier for us to think of things in smaller chunks. You know, I'm not saying we shouldn't be visioning. I'm not saying, right? I'm not saying that that's not part of it. But has anybody ever worked for someplace that did a strategic plan and had this strategic plan? And then 3 years later, we do a new strategic plan and we didn't really do anything on the old strategic plan because the world had changed enough that, right? So I'm not saying don't do it because it's important to think about that stuff. But also don't get caught in the merry-go-round part of, because it can be paralyzing for a lot of us.
It gives you permission to live in the here and now.
Yeah. Or just the near future and the near past, right? It's just like if we think about, oh God, that was a giant mistake, that piece of software we installed. Oh God, that was terrible. Well, okay, so what did we learn from it? What are we going to do differently next time? And then we move on, as opposed to we're not going to live in that history, for the rest of our lives, just like the forward direction. We're not going to live out there for the rest of our lives too. So one of the things that I think is really important for people to know and understand about those that can help us make decisions about things, the helpers in the world, is I like to describe the helpers of the world on a spectrum of helping. And by spectrum, I don't mean one end is bad and the other end is good. It's just a difference among the spectrum, right? So we're not talking positive, negative, good, bad, number 1, number 10 things. We're just talking about differences along the spectrum. So if you think about a spectrum of helpers, I always think about the best place to start on one end. I just like to use my left end because I'm a human and an American and I read from left to right. So on the left end of this spectrum of helpers would be a consultant. And generally in the world, a consultant is somebody who has information that I need. That consultant has that information maybe because they've done it, maybe because they've researched it or have had some sort of education that they, maybe just because they're an entrepreneur and they decided they're going to put all this stuff together in one thing and have it available. So let's think about if we were a person and we were in the world to write a book. We wanted to write a book in the world. Right? So I could Google really quickly how to write a book, and there's probably 100 different responses that I would get back. That would be for $19.99, for $29.99, for $129.99. Here's how to write a book, right? It'll give you an outline, all the things that you might need to write a book. If that was valuable to me, I would pay money, and I would get that in return, right? There would be an exchange, a value exchange. Consultants are important, are necessary, and are valuable. Most of the time, it's just an exchange. A lot of times, there's not what I would call a relationship, right, with a consultant. Sometimes there are, but generally, we're talking about an exchange. Information, you have it, I need it, I'll give you money, you'll give me this stuff. So, like I said, if we're writing a book, a consultant helper would be somebody who could say, here's all the steps to writing a book. Fair enough? Next on the spectrum would be a mentor. Similar in some ways, right, to a consultant. Generally, there's no money exchange, if you will, in a mentorship, but there is value exchange, right? There's experience that I might have as a mentor that I could give to, not give experience, but you know what I'm saying, help with, because of my experience, I can help with my mentee. Also, most of the time, mentors get just as much value out of the relationship as the mentee does. But it's not quite the same as a consultant relationship, right? Because you're not exchanging perhaps a product for something else, in this case, money. So in our book example, perhaps I'm a female writer who wants to write a book in the horror genre. And maybe there's just not a lot of those people out there in the world. So I have found several and I've contacted them on LinkedIn and started a relationship with them, right? A mentorship relationship. And in those cases, perhaps one of those mentors shared with me the contact information for her publisher, right? Like, or maybe she shared with me some kind of groups or things that she was part of that were helpful to her, right? Still an exchange of information, not necessarily an exchange of money, and also still a helper. Right? So we've got consultant and mentor. Then we have therapists, right? We all know about therapists. We all know what generally therapists do in the world. Of course, there's an exchange, right? Generally knowledge exchange. You generally in the therapist world, a therapist's job is to help their client move from dysfunctional to functional. I don't really love those words because I think we have a bad taste in our mouth about the word dysfunction. Because I think when we think of dysfunction, we think, oh my God, I can't get out of bed. And that's not at all what that means. So I like to think of therapist jobs as helping us move from the past to the present. So once again, there's an exchange, right? Sometimes money exchange or insurance exchange or whatever. Therapists are very obviously trained. They have particular tools that they're trained to use to help people move. You know, something is happening in their life that is blocking them from being productive in a way they want to be. And so a therapist helps them move from past to present, dysfunctional to functional, right? So let's think about in our book writing scenario, maybe I have a really hard time getting started writing my book, and I'm talking to my therapist about it. And maybe what happens is my therapist helps me figure out that when I was growing up, my parents were not fond of any kind of creative business as a way to make a living. And so when I grew up, I took that in. And so part of my resistance to writing this book I've always wanted to write is I have this block in my head from the past that's like, oh, I can't do this. And so a therapist helps me unwrap that and understand that, okay, that's why I think this way. And now can I move forward, right? So past to present. Consultant, mentor, therapist, coach. So like in the therapy role, dysfunctional to functional, a coach walks with their client going from functional to optimal. Or in those other words, present to future. So there's an exchange, just like there is, obviously, there's value exchange. Coaches are never therapists unless they've been trained. But oftentimes therapists are coaches. They employ coaching skills in their practice. So a lot of people, will see a therapist and they're not just working from past to present, they're working from, present to future or functional to optimal, right? And in coaching, just like in therapy, there are times when we talk about the past because there's things that have happened in our lives that prevent us from getting to that optimal, right? We're functional, we're able to do what we're doing, but there are things that we haven't addressed that are preventing us from going someplace else. A coach does not give advice or opinions. A coach asks deep, empowering questions because the theory behind coaching is that every client knows the answer down deep. They may just have never answered it or allowed themselves permission to talk about it. And so a coach's job is to walk with that client and next to that client. Do we have tools we use? Of course we have tools we use, right? Like anything else. But in our book example, perhaps I have decided I'm going to write this book, and I kind of work on it a little bit at a time, but I just can't seem to get it finished. So we talk with the coach and we talk about, how do I finish this book? It's important to me. Why is it that I'm not spending the time, right? So maybe we talk about that. Maybe we talk about how do you, this is your side hustle. So how do you put the time in on the side to get this thing done that's really valuable? And so we ask questions like that, right? They're functioning in the world. Everything's fine, but it's not where they want it to be. And so the coach's job is to walk with somebody help them answer the questions about where they want to be. Maybe the answer to the question is, I thought I should write this book, and once I started writing it, I decided I don't need to write this book. I always thought I should because of A, B, C, and X, Y, Z. Well, hallelujah, you have permission to not do it anymore then if you don't want to do it, right? Or maybe put it away, and if you decide to do it again in a year, whatever. So you can see kind of a difference between the coach and the therapy. And that really is past to present, present to optimal, or present to future. And then I always say on the right side of these helpers in our lives is our best friend, right? Whoever that may be. And while generally our best friends, most of the decisions we're making, generally our best friends can be supportive of. I suppose if we say, okay, I'm going to become a heroin addict, maybe our best friends aren't going to be as supportive of that. But generally, our best friend's role is to support us in the things we want to be doing in life. We want to try, and that's different than a coach or a therapist, right? A coach's job is to be a cheerleader, but also to be a challenger, and to say, why do you believe that? Where is this coming from in your belief structure? And those are conversations some of us can have with our best friends. I'm not saying that they're not out there. But more likely than not, our best friend's role as a helper is a supporter once we are working through what we want to do. So I hope that's a little bit helpful for you, because we need all of that. We all, believe me, I don't care who you are, but I'm going to tell you, we all need therapy at some point in our life, because we've all been messed up by our parents. Even though our parents didn't try to mess us up, we took it in the way we took it in. Every single one of us has that. And so, we all have a need for all of those things in the world. And sometimes it's, I just don't know if I'm making the right decision, right? The need for that looks a lot different than, I don't know if I want to turn this into a side hustle or not, right? Or looks a lot different than, I can't be the CEO of a company. Women shouldn't be CEOs of companies, right? Like, those are all things that bring in different things, and we all have to figure out how we work through them. I did say a coach is never a therapist unless they're a trained therapist. A therapist can absolutely be a coach. Also, coaches refer to therapists often, because if you're working with a trained coach will know when the time has come that this is a thing that needs to go to therapy and not coaching. And there's no, if you engage with any coach, no matter what, there's nothing bad about that. Because a coach knows what they're trained in and what they're not trained in, right? So that doesn't mean with your coach you don't talk about what's happened in the past, because oftentimes our belief comes from what's happened in the past. But the foundation is we're at a functional state. So when you hear about different kinds of helpers in that way, my next question for you is, what can you do with that information now that you have answered the question about what concerns you the most about the future? Does it help you understand maybe what kind of helper I might need for certain things? And then what would you do with that next? What's the next step with that? Robin was nodding so that it was helpful. You don't have to say what kind of helper, but what can you do with that next?
Somebody before mentor. What was before?
Consultant. I'm just thinking. Yeah. Some of them are really fun, and some of them are blurred, right?
Yeah.
Some things are blurred, like everything in the world. And I would venture a guess there's a need for all of that, right? At different points, or even sometimes, right, at every point. So, okay, so Megan, your concern about making the right decisions for things. You don't have to tell us specifically, but likely you had in your head an example of something either that you've had to make a decision about or you're trying to make a decision about. So with that example in your head, can you now see better what kind of helper might be valuable to that particular question? Okay. Well, good, then I've done mine. But it is important that we recognize that there are different people out there in the world whose jobs it is to help us. And more than just the whatever 6 I went through, obviously there's lots more.
Not expecting one person to do something that's not in their wheelhouse.
Yeah, good, very good point. Very good point. Right, because if like I said with the coaching side, if somebody's talking to me and it's clear that they need a therapist, I have to be the one that says this is something that we, that can't be, not that it can't be, but that I'm not qualified to do. Just like a mentor should be able to say, it's not something I've ever had experience with. We can sure talk about it, but I can't give you advice or I can't give you whatever. That's a really good point to recognize that. What other thoughts about helpers?
I formed an advisory board for my business back when I started it. I just reached out to friends or people I admired and some people I met through LinkedIn, and I just asked would they be willing to serve on my advisory board. I would bounce questions off them, and sometimes if there were questions that I thought people wouldn't want to answer, I'd do it as like an anonymous survey.
And how did that go?
I learned a lot. And it was very valuable to me, and it's something I didn't go that formal with it, but now that I'm starting to, my life has totally changed why I started my business. But, so now I'm starting to look at, okay, when I retire, what does that look like? Now I've started to seek different advisors, people who are a little older than me and may have, done what I did.
Right.
How to do transition.
Great point. I mean, there's no reason, you don't have to be any kind of anything to have an advisory board. It can be a group of friends. It can be a group of people you've selected that have experiences that you didn't have, right? I mean, what a great way for you to be able to, have a retired accountant, have a, I don't know, whatever, people that will be honest with you to bounce stuff off of. Absolutely. That's a fabulous idea. And you get to and should pick people who are different than you and have different experiences than you. I worked for Propane Central for many years, and Dave Payne, at that point, it was a second generation family business, and he was the owner. And when he hired me, he said to me, I am very bad at letting people go because we run this business as a family business, and I hate letting people go, but I know when it's time. So I need somebody who can step into this role and understand that that's going to be part of what we need to be doing, because I am not good at it and I don't like it. And so part of this is we have to recognize the stuff we're not good at, be okay with that, and get help in those areas. If part of the reason when I left the United Way, part of the reason was because it was time for a true fundraiser to be at the helm, right? That's not me. I'm a relationship builder. I'm an administrator. I'm not a fundraiser. Could I have gone out and learned it and done it? Yeah, probably. But that wasn't for me then. And so I knew that it was time, because that's the time the organization had got to. And it wasn't personal or anything else. It was just that that's a skill that this organization needs next, because we all evolve, right? So yeah, to be able to build an advisory board. I have clients that will build a personal advisory board, not even around their business, but just help me make life decisions, because I'm at a place in my life where I'm doing that right now. Okay. I mean, you ask me, I don't give advice or opinions with my coach, but I'm happy to give you my advice or opinions outside of that. So, lots of people are happy to do that. So that's an idea that you could, for sure. It doesn't have to be a big formal deal either. It could be a group email with a couple questions a month, Yeah. You don't have to buy drinks. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be like dinner at the top of the rock.
Gift cards or Christmas cards.
Yeah. I mean, easy stuff like that. Yeah. So to sort of bookend the question of, when you think about your future, what concerns you the most? What about when you think about the future, what are your aspirations? And this is not a question that's the opposite of the concern. This is a question of what are your aspirations? So I'll give you a minute to think about that. Anybody have anything that comes to mind?
I'm hoping to build a business that is obviously successful, but also not dependent on me.
Okay.
Yeah. Away from, because I love owning a business, but it takes up so much time, and I want to be able to step away and enjoy life.
Yeah, absolutely. What else about aspirations?
I'm trying to take my website and monetize my website by taking every presentation I've ever done, you know, and putting that on there as like a paid service.
Yeah. Consultant.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a lot of work.
Yes, it is.
Not fun if you ask me. What other aspirations do you have for your business?
I've been going live a couple of times a week, doing creative tutorials, and I would love to build this online community that supports people, that supports other, like, I'm also an independent designer for Chat Couture, and one of their philanthropies is Lots of Love. So, being able to raise money for other organizations and things like that through this community.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And of course, I would love to be a full-time maker at some point, but that doesn't happen. I can still build that online community
Yeah, you
without.
have it. Yeah, for sure. What other aspirations? Mary?
Well, to set this building up for the next 100 years, and we need an elevator. It's a big project. I mean, that's that well.
That's a big aspiration.
That's a very big aspiration. So what are the steps they need to take to get there? One of my favorite things in like mindfulness and visualizations and meditation that I've done is this visualization is what does that day look like when you get what you want? And you walk through the door and who's there and how does it feel? And who's celebrating with you? And how did you get there?
Yeah. It's a really powerful visualization.
You can
exercise.
manifest it.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Anybody else want to share their aspiration?
Like to franchise the business,
Oh, yeah.
like first state, I think. So it'll have to be state, every state.
Right, because laws and even communities maybe, yeah. Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Yeah. Anybody else want to share? Anna, Ronnie? You don't have to if you want to.
Oh, I guess, excuse me. Again, with multitasking, you're so busy. So my aspiration someday is freedom. To not have that. So
What's preventing you from that now?
good question. Yes,
It's a really good coaching question, by
yes.
the way.
Yeah.
If you want an example of what coaching is like, right? Deep, empowering, open-ended questions. I don't have the answer, only he has the answer to that question. And sometimes he'll know it and it'll come right out,
Right.
and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
Likely, I bet you have something right now you could say to answer that question. It comes right to mind. You might just be afraid. You don't have to say it. But that's how coaching works, right? Because
Yeah.
oftentimes we get asked that question,
Yeah.
and when we're in a situation that we feel comfortable in, there's no reason I can't say it, right?
No.
It doesn't change anything right at the moment. But it's those deep, empowering questions. So that's how coaching works. is that there are those deep questions with the confidence that the client knows the answer. And just like all of us, some of us take longer to get to it. Some of us have spent 51 years of our lives preventing that answer from coming out, right? Others of us haven't. So we're each unique when it comes to that. I think what you've said makes me think of a really important topic. I just listened to a podcast the other day when I was on my walk about, it's a book that's been written, and I don't even know actually what the book is called, but the gist of the whole podcast and the book is about subtraction. And what should we be subtracting from our lives? Subtracting, which is different than saying no to. Because if anybody's been around me for a little bit of time, no is a complete sentence. Period. No is a complete sentence. Oftentimes, women have a hard time saying no. Not all women and not only women, but we feel like we have to have a reason a lot of times. I mean, like, once I realized no is a complete sentence, I started to look at my emails I was typing. And if I was saying no to somebody in an email, I realized I was typing, well, because of blah, 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 or I can't because of this and this and this, right? No. No is a complete sentence. It doesn't need a reason. So A, that's one thing. But B, what do we need to subtract from our lives to get the freedom we want? In your case, I'll just use you as an example, right? So there's the no's, right? The things that are coming in that we're being asked that we have to be thoughtful about and not add to our lives. But that was really powerful for me to think about. Those are two different things. No and subtract. Because we won't be able to franchise if we don't hone in on what it is that we need, right? We can't retire and perhaps sell our business or monetize our business unless there are certain things that we remove. Because we've got to have the time to put in to do that monetization. Right? And what it really, I think, all comes down to is boundaries. Because I think most of us are terrible with boundaries. Yep. Right? I mean, we're bad at boundaries. Most of our parents didn't have boundaries that they taught us. They probably had their own, right? But they didn't teach us. Most people I work with were never taught about boundaries. And if they were, what they were taught is guilt. I can't say no and go home at 5 instead of 6, right? Because there's something in here, some guilt to that. If I want more freedom, I have to figure out how to get that. And that generally means there's got to be boundaries. Oftentimes, boundaries are easier to set when you do something new. So when I went to work for the presbytery, I said, here's how much I want per hour. I don't do much peopling before 9 o'clock in the morning. And I only want to work part-time. And guess what? When Melanie, my boss, emails me and says, would you be willing to do a lunch meeting or breakfast meeting this day? I know that's not your favorite thing. I do it. Because she doesn't ask me every day to do that. We don't even do it once a month, right? So it's a boundary I've set. I set it at the beginning of the relationship, and it's honored. And she knows, even when she asks, I could say no. Same with my individual clients. Very rarely do I take any individual clients before 9 o'clock. Now, I'm up at 6. It's not because I'm sleeping. It's because that's my time. And I put a boundary around that, and I protected it. Rarely do I do things in the evenings. For sure don't do things in the evenings that are regular. Because it's my boundary. And when I went from full-time employment to self-employment, I was able to set that boundary. And I enforce it with myself. Because of the freedom that I desire. If there's a day where I don't want that same kind of freedom because I don't, the world changes. Okay, I can just change the boundary. But I totally recommend thinking about and honoring and following, especially if you're in the early stage of your business, to think about what those boundaries are and then tell people. Because when you told people, like, how hard is it for you to honor my boundary once I told you? When I told you I don't do much after 5, most of you are like, yeah, I get it. Right? No skin off your teeth. Now you know it. That doesn't mean you're probably not going to ask me to do something that you want to do. And I may still say yes, and I may still say no. Right? But it's just a boundary I've set. Mostly for myself. So, are you good at boundaries? No? Are you at a place where you can start thinking about and setting boundaries? Teaching your children about boundaries? I mean, I think the best way we teach our kids is by example, you know? And they can learn. At 4 years old, they can understand that, you know what, this is mom's time. You're welcome to sit right here by me, but this is my time. Who doesn't want a kid that grows up respecting that? And living it when they get to that stage in their life, right? Like, how much difference would it make in our lives if our parents had understood that? Like I said, I rag on parents a lot, but not because they did things intentionally bad to us, because most of our parents didn't do anything intentionally bad to us. It was just how we took it in. Right? So how about the rest of you? Are there some boundaries that you can think about that you could start to set? Yeah. Yeah. And if you set that boundary and honored it, how would you feel?
I mean, what was stress?
Yeah. What could you do with that less stress? Right? I mean, can you think of a boundary that you can set?
Well, a lot of it has to do with clients communicating, like sending texts and calling different times. I do have a contract that I said that states the hours, but I'm really sad.
So, okay, how about this? How about the next client you hire? You stick to the boundaries with that client.
Yeah.
Right? You've already trained the ones you have.
Yeah.
So untraining is different, right, than training. It is. The other thing I recommend that I always think is valuable is to press pause before you respond. Just, even if you can only get yourself to do it for 5 minutes. Like, I'm in a phase of my life where both my kids are in college, so guess what? The only time they talk to me is when they freaking need something. Usually money, right? So often, I was just responding and then being pissed off because all they ever wanted, they didn't care about what was going on in my life. They just wanted something. So you know what makes me feel better? They need it that second. So I just started with 5 minutes. I saw the text and I put my phone down. And then in 5 minutes, I responded. Or, and then I just kind of gradually. And guess what? They're learning. They get it. It's always funny when they text, I don't respond, and then they call. Right? It's never been an emergency yet. Yeah, exactly, right? But we train them. If we're sitting at our desk all day and we answer emails all day long, right? We train those around us that that's how we respond. So if it's too hard to pull the trigger, start with your next client and then work backwards. And in the meantime, press pause. Give yourself 5 minutes. Hey, your answer is going to be better. I'll tell you that. Especially if you are responding to something maybe, hard or not fun or whatever that kind of thing is. But think about your boundary and how you can manage it. And some of us have to have a boundary. We've got to start not where we want to be, right? Like, okay, still I'm going to respond to these texts, but I'm going to, it's like driving with your texting while you're driving, right? Like sometimes we have to employ tools that don't allow us to do that, like turning off our notifications. If it's not dinging, we don't know it's there, right? So yeah, I think that boundaries are something, especially for those of you who are starting businesses, wanting to start businesses, you know, working on growing businesses, because you're not going to be happy unless you have boundaries. And believe me, you aren't going to do your best work if you're in that state. You're just not. You know, you're going to do better work when you think, oh, God, I love my freedom. I mean, you are. It's going to come through all the work you do. You know, you're going to do better work when you allow yourself to create the creative space that you need in order to be creative and get what you want done. Right? You can't, I mean, I think creatives are the best examples, because most people who are creatives, you can't just cram it in and decide right now is the time for me to be creative, right now. It just doesn't work that way. And so oftentimes creatives are pretty good with boundaries, actually, because they have learned. Those of us who have logic left brain people, we haven't learned that yet. It's a lot harder for us than the right brain kind of creatives, who they know that when the inspiration strikes, they have to be ready and willing and able, and or they have to set up the space, if you will, for that creativeness to happen. And those of us who don't live in that world, me included, I'm the logic left brain person, like, I have a lot to learn from that. Have a creative on your advisory board, definitely, because you will learn so much, you know, because we all see things from a different perspective. And especially if we're one side or the other, we can always use a little bit of infusion from the other side. So, yeah. So I don't need to go drone on and on. That's boring. So tell me what questions you have. I know I don't. I know there's questions.
So what does coaching look like? Do you have packages? Is it like a weekly, monthly, daily meeting?
So I'm about the easiest person there could be. So coaching looks like whatever the client needs it to look like. Generally, most of my clients we do 12 sessions, but that looks like what it needs to look like for the client. So some clients want to meet every week because that's just what they want. Some meet every other week. Some meet every week, and then they have kind of progressed through what they're really wanting to work on. And so then they go to every other week, because it's nice to have a touchstone. I have a client who we just meet, we had a pretty intense 12-week session, and now we just meet every other week. And because she likes to have that ability to have that intentional time to basically take care of herself. She considers that self-care. There are lots of tools that we use in coaching. My approach to coaching is that the client brings to the session what they want to work on. So I don't have what I would consider an agenda, which means session 1, we do this, session 2, we do this, session 3, we do this, because everybody has different things. And if in session 2, we start to talk about something that has to do with values, I have a values tool that can be used. If we go through 12 sessions and never get to that because it's not something that is important or valuable at the time, okay, we just don't use that tool. So, so I have an agenda, which means I walk clients through several steps during a session, because we always want there to be progress. But I don't have an agenda per se, as far as that's how that works. Generally, coaching sessions last about an hour. I do them virtually, I do them in person. I did one yesterday at Starbucks, sitting outside because it was so nice, you know, whatever's easiest for folks. And yeah, that's kind of how that looks. I would guess that that's going to be, at least around here, that's probably going to be how most coaching works. I'm not as familiar with other places, but I will tell you that theoretically, I mean, I believe that all coaching is life coaching. So even if you come to me with something about your small business, we're going to talk about your life, because generally it's impacting your business in one way, shape, or form. Same with leadership. People come to me all the time, want to work on their leadership skills and development. And that's awesome. And we definitely do that. And we talk about what's gotten them to that point or what's preventing them from. What else? Rodney, are you going to call BS on anything?
Do what?
Are you gonna call BS on anything?
No.
Come on, I need people to hold me accountable. I could have slipped something in there that's total BS.
No.
What else? What other questions? About anything, doesn't have to be about coaching. I will put a plug in for Leadership Salina. If you have the interest, availability, it's a great program. You will make 30 of your new best friends, ask Robin. And it is one of the best ways to network, to get to know people, and to learn and develop leadership skills.
When are applications open?
Applications open in July, and we always it's basically August through November. Every other week for a full day is kind of how that works. If you're interested and don't want to think about it, like remember about July, shoot me an email, I'll put you on the list, and then when applications come out, we'll send it to you, so you like don't have to think about, oh gosh, July, maybe, whatever.
We'll post it in the startup.
Yeah, that too, for sure. And Steph Gillig at the Chamber's the one who manages all that stuff for the program, so literally she just keeps an email list, and over the year, as I talk to people and say, oh, nice. Hey, put this person on the list. If some years it works for people, and other years, just based on life, it doesn't.
Do you get more applicants than you have openings?
Sometimes that's the goal. Yes, that's the goal. I facilitate the program by myself. I have help from Steph. She does all the administrative stuff, which is awesome. But once you get over 30 students, it's just was your year a bigger year? I don't know. I don't remember. One year recently we had 34 or 36. And it's a lot when you think about going places in a group. It's just 30 is kind of the sweet spot. So, and we almost always have right around that number of applications. So,
So what is this?
So Leadership Salina is a program that we have three purposes. One is to introduce students to the community. So we do tours of businesses. We go places that people probably maybe have never had a tour of. We always come to the temple for a tour because most everybody has never been or they may have been here, but they've never been upstairs on the stage, or we try to help from the chamber perspective. We try to help people see businesses. We went on a tour last week. We got to have a tour of the brand new Great Plains plant out there where Phillips was. So we try to take people to see things they maybe haven't necessarily seen in Salina. The second part is we do a community project. And so we break the group up into teams, and they do a project that benefits the community, and they have to develop that project. There's funding through a grant process, etc. And then the third part is leadership development. And so we teach the competencies that come from the Kansas Leadership Center out of Wichita. And we spend time talking about those things and then being able to practice them back in your workplace. So I think it's $500 for the program. There are scholarships available.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah.
For anyone who's small.
Yes, there are scholarships available. And I don't know, the good part is I don't take care of all that part, so I don't know all the details. I think generally, based on however many scholarships there are asked for, there's a pool of money that gets divided up. So some years, if there's not very many scholarships, people get more money. Does that make sense? Versus if lots of people ask in a particular year, they give it all out. So, and then there is also, for those who have graduated from Leadership Salina, we have a new program from the past couple of years that there is scholarship money available for continued development in leadership. So if you wanted to go to a leadership development program, it's all through the chamber manages it. Yeah. So we have a really active Facebook page, Leadership Salina Facebook page. If you're on Facebook, I should say we're really active during this time of the year. when we're not in session, we're not as active, but and we have a pretty strong alumni group. We invite alums to come back and have lunch with us and stuff like that. So it's a really great, you know what? We've had people who, like, I have somebody this year who literally moved to Salina 3 months ago. Like, he was third day on the job at Hutton kind of thing, and is part of our program. And we've had people like James Lambert, who lived in Salina, literally was born here, grew up here, and has been here his whole life. And he just was in Leadership Salina like the year before he retired. And everybody learns just as much. So you don't have to be And you don't have to be brand new in your career. You don't have to be, we always want more entrepreneurs. We should talk about how do we scholarship through this too. Because it's hard for, we have two business owners in the class this year. And we know it's hard because if you're not at work, you're not making money. And so to take that time away is difficult. We understand that. So, yeah, so that's Leadership Salon. I think it's a great program, a great way to meet people, to find folks who are interested in similar things as you are. Or some of people are just forced to take it and then usually end up being okay with it. Right, Robin?
Right. It definitely is not my cup of tea, but I'm glad I did it. I'm glad my boss made me do it. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I definitely learned a lot. I grew and.
Yeah, and that's our goal. I mean, I don't really care if Robin can tell me all the competencies of the KLC. That's not the goal. The goal is at some point you grow and you learn something, and probably you've made lots of relationships from that. Yeah, which
I just don't leave my four walls.
your cubby hole. Yeah, which is hard, and a lot like small business owners. That's part of what happens with them too, right? Is you're sitting at your desk most of the time,
Yes.
and
Get out of
sometimes
your silo.
it's good to be forced,
Yes.
to get out of your walls. So, yep. What else can I help you with? I'm not business card. I apologize that this is my old name on my business card, but I'm also a business owner and a chief and haven't gotten new business cards with my new name. But I will answer to anything you call me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I hope you
Fantastic.
got some information, and
Yes.
I'm always up for coffee. So if you just want to go have coffee and chat, that gets me out of my four
After
walls.
9.
Yeah, after 9, yes. Oh, email me in, I actually do quite a bit of work before 9, but I just don't people much before 9. And I finally, in 51 years, learned to not care. But it's real. What's the hardest? I think it is. The hardest part about it is when you've already trained people, by no fault of your own, it's just we've already trained them. And so it takes attention to move from that. And, oh God, that's right. Yeah. That's all I have. 7:04. We went over time.